From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real questions, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. On this week's show, we have Yakov Smirnoff, a successful stand-up comedian who went on to get his PhD in psychology, leading me to the question, what are you doing with your life, Jerry Seinfeld? Get off your ass! And now, broadcasting from the Churn, that guy's Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
What a country! Yes, the great Yakov Smirnoff is going to join us for the interview in this show. And a delightful guy. I mean, just really interesting guy, intelligent guy. And still has it, though. Still, cuts it up. And we were cracking up throughout the entire thing. Just a great interview with a great guy. Really cool science that he did too.
Yeah, and that's it's really amazing. I think our listeners will really enjoy this a lot, kind of digging into relationships and humor and psychology and how it all fits together. Really interesting stuff.
I love it. And it's one of those things that there's aspects of human interaction that I think are extremely common and we take them for granted. And I always really like when somebody like Yakov does a deep dive into it. Mm-hmm. Kind of like sexuality, like sensuality and sex and or fear or in this case laughter are just these things that just sort of happen and we just kind of know them fluently, but it's neat when somebody who can do it fluently sort of unpacks it and dissects it and helps you understand, hey, I know how to do this. I can sing the song by heart, but I've gone back now and I've learned how to read the music. And here's what this was. And that's fantastic. So it was a really cool interview, man.
Yeah.
And what a neat thing to get to do.
Exactly. Well, let's jump into
with no
it.
further ado, here is the interview with Yakov Smirnoff.
We have with us Dr. Yakov Smirnoff, a recent PhD graduate from Pepperdine University, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. And so I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with your work as far as stand-up comedy. My dad, I grew up listening to a lot of your stand-up because my dad was a huge fan. So, so Greg Tangeman from Wilmer, Minnesota says hi.
There you go.
Oh, he's the one I've been waiting to hear from.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, now my bucket list is full.
There it is. That was the one. But no, you've had such a huge career.
The last drop in the
that was
bucket.
it. That was the last one. Now your work is complete.
I'm done. We don't have to continue this conversation. We're good.
And that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for coming. That was a great interview.
It was a pleasure.
That's a win.
Yeah.
He still got it.
So we one of our listeners to the show kind of hooked us up, I guess, because he heard you on Dr. Drew's podcast as well as I did. Jim and I also heard you on there. And,
Dr. Drew, great guy,
yeah,
friend of the show.
And
wonderful.
Your research and getting into psychology and the psychology of laughter is really intriguing. Before we get into that, I just kind of want to start. How did you get into stand-up comedy?
Well, I started as just a funny kid in the former Soviet Union, or now it was Soviet Union then, and I, would get in trouble a lot, in school.
Right.
Yeah, I would get in trouble big time because I don't know if you're aware, but the term political correctness started in the Soviet Union in 1917.
Huh.
Yeah. After the revolution, Lenin created this terminology that would follow the line of the party line, basically. And anything that was said that didn't agree with the party line, that was off limits. So it was politically incorrect, which followed by many times imprisonment in, labor camps.
Wow.
And, it was just basically things like that was normal there. And, millions of people got hurt just by saying something that, was politically incorrect.
Wow.
And so I did my share of that. I didn't get into prison, but I would be in the principal's office so many times that they gave me my own key. and I knew the corner I had to stand in. So I they just streamlined my appearances in principal's office.
Wow.
So you kind of had that mentality of kind of going against the system in a sense.
In some ways, but trying to be as clever as possible, because you see, later on I became a comedian, and to Americans, Russian comedian sounds like Amish electrician.
Yeah.
You know, but we had a department of jokes that would censor our material.
Really?
And each state, we had 16 states, that each state had a Ministry of Culture with Department of Humor, Department of Music, Department of Singing. All of that stuff had to be censored by this bureaucrat.
Wow.
And so one of the things that was fun for people, you know, who were clever, is to find something that the public will identify with, but the bureaucrat will not see.
Oh, wow.
Right.
So it had to be subtle and have a double meaning.
Yes. And so that was my training by being in the Soviet Union and becoming a comedian, starting to work on cruise ships. I was fairly successful for that market, and I, because my material was approved, I tried to stay within my parameters. But when it was telling jokes to my
friends
who I trusted, then anything goes.
Right. Wow. That's interesting. So where would you say your humor comes from? Were your parents really funny, and did you...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
My dad, my mom, both were very, very funny, and I grew up recognizing that humor can really diffuse a lot of tension, because we lived in a lot of tension. We lived in a communal apartment with 9 other families.
Gosh.
That's socialism for you. So about 19 people in one apartment with one bathroom, and that's how you learn to do the Kazatsky dance, because you're standing in line to go to the bathroom for 20, 30, 40 minutes,
Wow.
And, so again, this environment, and a lot of comedians will tell you that normally they're funny because they had a rough lifestyle.
Right.
And they had to cope. And they've developed this humor that they can carry, forward.
Right. Yeah. And that seems to be a pretty common theme through all of stand-up comedy, I've noticed. In what other ways would you say that humor was really important to your life?
Well, I think it got me laid.
That's good.
Can't underestimate the value of that.
That was pretty important.
Yeah.
I wasn't very athletic. I wasn't into science much, so I needed to have some kind of my corner in the market.
There it is.
So,
there it is.
Yeah, and that's actually a great psychology, because women's laughter, what men are after.
Yeah.
Because if we can get them to laugh, we can get them to do a lot of other things.
Right.
Yeah, is that kind of what got you into psychology?
Well, actually, it was probably the reverse of that. When I was married, and then laughter went away.
Right.
And that's where and then I went through a divorce, and the only people who were laughing were attorneys. And so that was my quest. I remember my daughter asking me when I was reading her a bedtime story, and it ended with "they lived happily ever after." And my daughter looked at me with her big blue eyes and said, "Daddy, why didn't you and Mommy live happily ever after?"
Oh, wow.
And I came up with a great answer. I said, go to sleep.
That's a good line.
I stayed awake. I stayed awake for the next 20 years in a way of wanting to understand. And that's the psychology part that kind of started. As a comedian, I use laughter as my gauge, as my GPS, and with my audience. And I believe that that's what happens with relationships. When people get into a relationship, laughter is a huge part of that.
Right.
Most people not recognize that. But I asked this question over like 4.5 million people in my theater in Branson, Missouri. I keep asking, I said, any of you would go on a second date if you didn't laugh on the first date? Please applaud. And silence. Never anybody clap.
Wow.
Right.
So that tells you, in my opinion, that was the beginning of my research, is to recognize that that's universal, that laughter is there in the beginning of the relationship. And then for some reason, that's what was my interest. Why does it go away?
Right. You know, and anecdotally, I have evidence for that. I mean, when I was dating, a few years ago, when I was kind of in the dating scene, the dates that always went the best were the ones where there was the most laughter. And those were usually the ones that actually turned into some kind of a relationship. If there wasn't any laughter, then there was nothing ever came of it.
Well, unless they're laughing at you and you haven't said anything, that's usually a sign that it's not going well.
And if they're pointing and laughing, that's even worse.
I've found those dates were not my most successful.
You're probably right. Now that answers a lot of questions I had. Yes, right there.
So Yakov, you're talking about sort of what got you interested in psychology, and it was both the laughter and the connection that brings, and also the absence of it. So you've now done quite a bit academically. Help our audience understand some of the academic journey that you've done in the field of psychology.
Well, I went to first to University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League school, and I studied with Martin Seligman, who is the founding father of
positive psychology. Yeah, that's awesome.
I was in his inaugural class for my master's degree.
Wow!
And I got that was great training, and then I thought I was done. But then I kept studying more and more, and I thought, well, maybe I need to get more education, which I did. I went to Pepperdine. It's Pepperdine Graduate School of Education and Psychology, and graduated this May 18 with my doctorate degree. So my dissertation was the law of laughter. Short LOL.
That's clever.
Well done.
190 pages of research.
Wow.
And it was pretty extensive, but it was very satisfying because my original research with the group of I talked to the married women who've been married over 3 years, and wanted to understand if there's some kind of a correlation between the beginning of the relationship and then as the relationship progresses. And every one of the people that I interviewed were absolutely 100% saying that laughter is essential to a healthy relationship.
Yeah, and I think in one of your interviews that you did, you talked about the 3-piece formula for laughter. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, God, I don't remember what it was. What was it? Well, do you remember any of that?
There was, you had to have a common sense of humor, I think was one.
Yeah, I get it, yes, the formula, that was actually, I called it the law. That's why I couldn't connect.
Oh, right.
The law of laughter is being complementary opposite.
Yes.
So it's like performer in the audience. You got somebody or speaker and listener. If we were speaking at the same time, it would not be a conversation. It would be democratic debate. You know?
Yeah, it is like that.
So, or presidential debate, any debate, you know, they're talking over each other.
Right.
So you need those two elements, somebody giving, somebody receiving. And then they can switch places. And when the other person gives, then the first person receives. So that's essential. And then they need to have shared sense of humor. And most people, we might have totally different senses of humor, but you find somebody who is on that first date that you unconsciously finding somebody who has the same sense of humor as you do.
Yeah, that is important.
Go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you. I think that is so important. It's not something I think we really talk about in a lot of couples therapy books or a lot of compatibility tests that you see online. They completely skip over that. But I think what you're saying is absolutely vital to a relationship.
It is, and you can't fake it. That's why it happens or it doesn't happen. And most of the time, people say, that when you start dating, they say, well, there's plenty of fish in the sea. I agree, but there are also sharks and piranhas, and you don't want to end up with crabs, right?
Right.
So you got to have some kind of a way to identify who's the right person, right? So
Right.
I call it catch and release program, laughter catch and release program. So when you're laughing with somebody, that's somebody to keep. It doesn't mean you're gonna, keep them forever, but it might be a good meal.
Right.
But if you're not laughing, throw them back, and hopefully one day you meet somebody who's a perfect catch, and then you stop them and you hang them on the wall.
Happily ever after.
That's right. So the first ingredient of that formula is complementary opposites. Second ingredient is shared sense of humor. And third ingredient, you need to meet each other's needs. That's the one that most people, and I think for your therapy, if you guys think about it, that's what the most problems are. It's not in sense of humor, because humor, you had it from the day you born till the day you die. You might have Alzheimer's, you still will keep your sense of humor.
Right.
It's the last thing to go.
Right.
So the humor and the shared sense of humor doesn't go away. And complementary opposites can go away, because all of a sudden you're giving at the same time the other person is giving and nobody's receiving.
Right.
So that's the point of contention. And the other one is that you don't recognize the other person's needs. You think it's, those books, 5 Love Languages, that's a great book for that, or the book, His Needs, Her Needs, Dr. Willard Harley is a great book. Those tune you in to recognize that you have more likely very different needs. And in the beginning of the relationship, it is now proven by scientists that Mother Nature gives us about a year pre-introductory offer where it tells us what are the needs of our partners so we can procreate. And after that, Mother Nature doesn't care.
Right.
So it was like pre-introductory offer, and then you got to pay full price.
Then the interest kicks in.
Oh, big time.
So for those relationships that kind of fall apart, that where they kind of stop meeting each other's needs, is it that? Because in my mind, I'm thinking about relationships that I've been in the past where there was a lot of laughter in the beginning, and then the laughter kind of starts to fade away. Is it so? It's more that we stop meeting each other's needs, not necessarily that somebody just gets tired of somebody else's sense of humor.
No, humor. You don't need to worry about that at all. Those two other ingredients are flexible. Humor is stable,
right?
And that's what most people will say. Well, he's not funny anymore. She doesn't laugh at my jokes anymore. No, it's not because of that. It's because they're no longer complementary opposites.
Yes.
They're not receiving and on a consistent basis, or they're giving something that is not what the other person wants because they don't know what the needs are.
Right. And that makes so much sense. I'm glad we talked about that because I think that is I've heard that a lot of times before with couples that they feel like they've kind of lost that sense of humor or like, she's sick of my jokes or any of that, but it's really more about the needs than anything else.
Yes, they sense it when the other person is rolling their eyes. There's contentment. There's John Gottman work. The stonewalling. All of those things are results of those two issues that I'm saying that nobody's exploring. They're exploring it. It's just not as obvious that we stopped understanding what the other person's needs are. Because it happens to everyone because the Mother Nature is not sparing anybody.
Right.
Whoever is falling in love, they get oxytocin, dopamine, they have, or the serotonin. It just floods our brains. So we're like drugged up. We're on drugs.
Right.
And then all of a sudden the Mother Nature stops doing that.
Right. Because
you got laid, you got pregnant, the whole thing is just like Mother Nature goes, okay, I don't need to work hard anymore.
Right.
Let them figure it out. Let them go to therapists so therapists can make some money.
That's how I think of my profession, Yakov. I am the extension of Mother Nature. I'm here so you can keep having sex.
Definitely support of Mother Nature because if you can do what she did in the first year, you're doing awesome. You would have so many clients, you would know what to do with it.
True. It's funny, too, because so much of what you're saying, I think I've found to be absolutely true in couples work. Whenever I meet a couple who is in a bad place and they're at sort of this, place where they're thinking about divorce or giving up, they take everything very seriously. And they're very much counting every single bad move, and they're taking offense at every little thing. There's very little generosity, there's very little grace, and there's very little laughter. And I think that one of the things that I try to do in my work, whether I do it subtly or intentionally, is try to break that ice and get people laughing and figure out what their sense of humor is and help them remind them of good times. And usually that kind of thaws the relationship a little bit. What I love about your formula is it kind of explains, find the missing ingredient. There's one of these three things. Find the one that is missing and restore that, and you can actually do a great deal of good for a relationship.
Exactly. And when you start the relationship, the first thing you experience is laughter. And then the relationship continues and progresses into intimacy. And then you choose to move in together and get married and laughter, and it's totally in reverse, the other way around. What you're dealing with, when people come into your office, they're having challenges, right? So laughter was the first thing to go. Second thing is intimacy.
Yes.
And third thing is your house.
I mean, that's science. That's just statistically validated.
I have 190 pages to prove it.
So, Yakov, one question I had. So when we're talking about the importance of humor early on in a relationship and that need or that desire to make the other person laugh, is there a difference between genders? And is it equal both ways? Like, do men have that need to make the woman laugh more? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Big time. Yes. Yeah, and Darwin even was doing research on that when he was looking at the animal kingdom, he was recognizing that the way the woman selects or female selects a male is understanding the ability of that male to provide for the offspring. Right?
Right.
Laughter is a sign of high, or humor is a sign of high intelligence.
Ah.
So when you have that, and it translates to unconsciously to a female, that if this man makes me laugh, he's smart. Therefore, my child will have better chance of survival.
Thank you very much, because since we've started this podcast, both myself and our producer Jacob have been wondering what Jim's wife sees in him. I feel like now we get it.
Because I've got a solid 5 minutes in the bedroom.
There you
Still
go.
wondering.
You beat most of the records. So that's,
But that's an interesting theory. I've actually heard a version of that I think is really true, which is humor, and some people would say society itself is just an elaborate mating dance. Like, it's just all like the birds of paradise dancing and throwing feathers around, just ultimately trying to win that affection. And to some extent, I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm saying it happens subliminally. That's why most people, when they ask that question, they, in the audience, they just kind of freeze. They go, I never thought of it that way.
Wow.
But yes, I would not go on a second date if there would be no laughter. And that tells that person most of the time it's the female who we're waiting for her to laugh. If she laughs, we're establishing, look at this formula. We're establishing who is giving, who is receiving. So we're establishing complementary opposites. When the male makes female laugh, it establishes, he's giving something to me. She's receiving that. By her laughing, she's giving back to him.
Right.
So it's a perfect cycle.
Well said.
That's amazing. Well, thank you.
Now, I want to come across, that that's the only way. There are many women who my wife makes me laugh.
Right.
And I love it when she just, she's got her way to just, to look at me or say something and I just crack up. And
right.
I feel that's, but I do think it was my job to make her laugh.
And that's well said. I think that you're being fair on that point that, of course, both genders can be funny. There's amazing female comedians out there and actresses.
Oh, yeah.
And of course that can be part of what they enjoy and even part of their mating ritual too. There's exceptions to every rule, if there is a rule, as Darwin said. But yeah, great point. I know my wife, she is a elementary school teacher. And so when she can make her third graders laugh, she'll come home and immediately tell me what she said. And I just stare at her like, nothing, not a crack. And she's like, well, third graders thought it was great. And I'm like, I'm sure you killed. You got to know your audience. You know your room. That's fine.
That's right. Yeah. Well, good for her.
Yeah. So,
but it's an interesting psychological positioning when you're making somebody laugh. It's almost an intentional positioning of saying, I'm the leader at this moment, and you are the follower.
Yeah,
but it's not wrong. Without somebody laughing, the leader has nobody to lead.
Right.
And unfortunately, we diminish this role, follower or supporter, but if you look at any preacher or a politician, who they start their speech normally with a joke. And what to me it says, they're establishing who is who for that particular interaction. And once the audience laughs, it's an agreement saying, you gave us something of funny, clever, we agree it was funny, and then without saying anything else,
Yes.
we have established this.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Once you make the room laugh, it's your room. That now you're in charge of that room.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is if we stop laughing at Jim's jokes, then he'll stop trying to establish dominance.
Yeah, then I'll just walk away.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. If I hear crickets, I can finally just walk away and go back to bed.
Yeah, if it happens enough times, you have to walk away. Yeah.
Challenge accepted.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. Where can our listeners find you?
I'm sorry, just Yakov.com. Erase that part. Otherwise, I'll get
Yakov.com.
emails. Yeah. And then you can find me on social media. On Twitter, it's Yakov_Smirnoff. And same as Instagram and Facebook is just Yakov Smirnoff.
Excellent. And you're performing. You got a place. You got a theater in Branson, right? So that's.
I own a theater in Branson. They can see me there October 11th through December 7th this year.
Wonderful.
And then I travel. Just go on Yakov.com and you'll find my schedule.
Yakov.com. When are you next performing in Moscow?
Yeah, I'm hoping not very soon.
If you go there, I think you'll have a permanent show residence.
Yeah, I think Putin has enough of jokes over there.
Yeah. So you won't be showcasing at the Kremlin. Got it.
No, not for a while. No.
Well, if you're ever in Las Vegas and you're doing a show, please get a hold of us. We'd love to have you on the show again.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Excellent.
And I commend you for doing great work. I mean, that's so important to translate this knowledge to average person that can help whether it's relationship, whether it's mental health, whatever it is. If you explain it in a simple way, I think it's a great gift.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate that.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Well, that was fun.
Wow,
That went well.
another guest that we didn't deserve.
And we didn't have to pay for this one. We got a piece of love there at the end, and I didn't have to tip him. This is great. Damn it. This is going to be a thing, I think.
Yes.
I was told Jim would go away.
A laughter scientist just explained to me the formula, and I'm waiting. I was made promises. Well, that was fun. That was
fun.
really good. I think that having Yakov on the show, I mean, again, we want to extend our thanks for joining us, and I hope that everybody got something out of that. It's so interesting because here's this person who has been a worldwide phenomenon in his time, a comedic powerhouse, during a very important era in American history, and then, has had a second act and has gone on to do academia and do science, and especially I think it must have been so profound for him to just get to go back and now study the science of what he can do naturally.
I know, isn't that awesome?
Yeah, it's kind of like Tom Brady going back and studying the physics of football.
Right,
When
yeah,
it's
if
like,
he had a PhD
he just
in
knows
physics.
how to do it. Yeah, like he just knows how to do it. And then eventually it's like, oh, I know the mechanics of it. And it's like, cool, it must have been really rewarding to do that. So,
Yeah.
and a neat theory. I think
It is.
the
It's-
law of laughter is a really good one.
Everything makes sense,
Yes.
and it's one of those things I think sometimes that maybe we as therapists don't pay enough attention to. We focus on a lot of the needs things and what's missing in a relationship and not really
Right.
addressing the humor and how important that is.
No, I thought he made a lot of really good points, and it's tough. I think that obviously, it's hard for a person to give you 198 pages of nuanced science in a 30-minute take. And I'm sure that given a long-form academic interview and during his defense of his dissertation, I'm sure that there, some of the weeds in the areas were probably, plucked out. I'm sure that there's some listeners that thought, well, gee, that kind of seems maybe chauvinistic, to say that only males can be funny. And he didn't say that, but, that's an inherent male trait when that isn't necessarily true. There's lots of males that are not funny. And I'm sure that, again, to those of you who may have kind of caught some of that and maybe found some edges on it, if a person sits down and has to do the dissertation, what happens in that process is you have to go through a defense. And that's where people just rip to shreds any presuppositions that you had, anything that, would have gotten caught in the gender filter or doesn't, completely line up. And they have to have an explanation to unpack that too. And I'm sure long form he would have. So, but very cool theory anyway.
There's a lot of stuff online. If you can go to his YouTube page. Actually, if you just
Yakov,
search
just tag Yakov Smirnoff,
and it'll take you to his page. And he's got a lot of he's got a PBS thing up there.
Oh, wow.
That I watched as well that he did. We kind of went into a little bit more detail and everything.
Fantastic.
But, yeah, amazing, just really interesting research that he's got
and
going.
Special thanks to Leon Kasab, who booked this one for us.
Man.
Good guy.
What would we do?
Yeah.
What would we do without him?
Also, we'll have to say for the record, he was the first lawyer who was ever on our show.
He was. We got that wrong.
Yeah, it had to be corrected.
Yeah, when I say we, I mean you.
Me. I did it.
Got that wrong.
I did that.
Yeah. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will talk about opening up to your therapist. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's TheraProducer sponsor is David Datascoop Violon. David is a Soviet-born American comedian, actor, and writer. He began his career as a stand-up comic in Ukraine, then immigrated to the United States in 1977 in order to pursue an American show business career, not yet even knowing English. He reached his biggest success in the mid to late 80s, appearing in several films in the television sitcom vehicle What a Country. His comic persona was a naive immigrant from the Soviet Union who was perpetually confused and delighted by life in the United States. His humor combined a mockery of life under communism and of consumerism in the U.S., as well as wordplay caused by misunderstandings of American phrases and culture, all punctuated by the catchphrase, "And I thought, what a country!" If you know
who that is.
If you have any clue who David is, you can tell us at www.patreon.com/therapy.
And if you don't, you're not listening.
Go to www.patreon.com/therapy and help us make the show possible.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next question is about opening up to your therapist.
Hi, so my question is about trusting and opening up to your therapist. I've been seeing my therapist for a long time now, and I still can't fully up and talk about the hard things. I like my therapist, and I don't want to see anyone else. I have trouble opening up to everyone, including all past therapists, so it's not just her. Is there any way I can become comfortable enough to bring up the things that are hurting me? Even the idea of writing it down and giving it to her is too much. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, this is a common thing.
I think it's very common.
Yeah, and this is, I can think of a lot of folks that I've worked with in the past, especially youth that I've worked with, where we just kind of start chipping away at things at a really small pace, a manageable, whatever is manageable for the client. And there'd be times that, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, or a year down the road, that we start getting into something and something else comes up, like, I didn't tell you about this other traumatic event that happened.
Yes.
And it's really all based off of the comfort level of the client. So whatever your time frame is for that is what's best for you. And so my suggestion would be baby steps.
Yeah.
I mean,
don't rush it.
Right. I mean, even if it's just something that, if it's too much to write down, writing down the whole story is too much, maybe start by writing down a few key points, just some bullet points or something, or whatever you feel like you can handle at that moment. But then the big thing I always like to tell people too is be aware of your own anxiety and stress level. If we're talking like a scale from 0 to 10, where 10 is out of control, where your emotions just feel like they are in control and you can't handle it, find your manageable point, where that, like, okay, I know that when I'm at a 6, I'm feeling really uncomfortable, but I can still manage it.
Right.
And as you're writing stuff down, just be conscious of where you're at mentally and emotionally. And maybe when you start getting up to a 5, maybe that's when you need to take a break.
Yeah.
Don't allow yourself to get all the way up to that point of no return where you can't bring yourself back down. Just be aware of that. So that'd be my first piece of advice.
Yeah, pacing yourself. And, this is extremely common. And I appreciate, Ryder, that you're being honest about it. And I got to tell you, if I were your therapist, this is something that sometimes I can feel like I'm detecting, and I can usually detect it whenever we're staying very surface level. And so, the person might update me about their week, which is very common, and that's a very valuable thing, and I'm glad for that, because I think it gives me insight into their lived experience and gives me opportunities to see how they think of things and what things mean to them and trickle in some insight when I can. But sometimes we just have this empty space where, like, I notice that I don't necessarily have a problem that I'm solving for them. They haven't presented to me as, here, Jim, I'm dealing with anxiety, or here, Jim, I'm dealing with depression, or something specific. And at the same time, I can kind of sense that we are connected, and they keep coming back. And, like, I can sense that they keep coming back because there's more. And sometimes it's because they want maintenance. They just want a safe person to check in with regularly in case things happen in their life. But sometimes I can tell that there's a lot being unsaid. And so it's tricky, writer, because obviously at the same time, there's two problems that I face as the therapist, and I'm empathizing with the other person in your life, the therapist in this case. A, I can't read minds. Neither can your therapist. And B, even if I could detect that something's going on, I have to be very cautious about pushing you too far too fast. Because I want to make sure this is a safe place for you. And if I've brought it up and you've demurred and, like, dodged that question, or, like, patted it down like it's no big deal, or even straight up lied to me, I'll ask you, hey, is this an area you could relate to? And if you're like, nope, not at all. And, like, okay, well, I can't break through that much deception. Like, at some point, either I'm going to be completely fooled by you, or I can tell there's more there, but I will choose not to go breaking down that door because our relationship is a voluntary experience.
Right.
And so I kind of nudge you to be open to this. And so the advice that I would have for you in this case, writer, if you're uncomfortable talking about the things that make you feel uncomfortable, such as these past events in your life that you've really never shared with anybody, perhaps you would feel more comfortable talking about the discomfort itself. And here's what I mean. It's not sitting down and saying, listen, this event happened to me in my late teens that I've never told anybody about. It could be, so listen, there's areas of my life that have caused me a lot of pain and are things that I've never really shared with anybody, including you. And I'm not sure if those are things that you think I should share, if there's value in that, but I have to report to you, I feel really uncomfortable with it. Is that something we can work on? And, most therapists are going to hear that and say, great. Here's the deal. I'm not going to ask you to reveal those things to me. Keep that locked away in the safe. Let's talk more about practicing opening up in general. Let's talk about the anxiety you're feeling about that thing, or about sharing as a concept. And that, writer, is like yoga for your soul. I mean, that is like helping you stretch into new formations that ultimately give you more emotional and mental flexibility in all of your relationships, and over time, even may allow you to crack open that safe and have the cathartic experience of revealing something that's true.
Yeah, I think the big thing there is just being open with your therapist and letting them know that there's more in there. And then I want to get to it, but a big part of that is establishing that trust with the therapist, that you understand that the therapist, it's almost kind of like a swimmer lifeguard relationship, where it's like, you in therapy, you want to challenge yourself. You want to push yourself and kind of go into the deep end.
Yes.
But before you do that, you have to trust that your lifeguard will jump in and pull you out if you need.
Yes.
And in that relationship, I think you have to establish that trust first. But I do think you have to communicate to your therapist and let them know, so they're not flying blind, that, there's some really important deep stuff here.
This is the deep water.
I want to get to it, and I will get to it, but I want to make sure that we're there. Right?
And to the general audience, I want you to notice what the writer's asking about here. Because for those of you that have often wondered, what the heck's the point of seeing a therapist? And some of you have even said that to yourselves. You're like, well, I don't have active anxiety. I don't have active depression. I've lived through some stuff, but who hasn't? I'm doing okay. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't have any kind of dysfunction going on in my life. That's totally fine. But I want you to hear what this writer's talking about. Sometimes what is profound about the relationship you develop with a therapist is it's this safe and strategic encounter with this other human being to do something that you do not normally do in your life. Almost all of our relationships are surface level, or the other person is served more by us. We tend to attend to them. We tend to love on them. And we don't feel safe revealing our truth, or we don't feel like it's practical because we don't think the other person really even knows what to do with it, or we don't like to feel needy, or whatever it is. But encountering a therapist as the writer is, and voluntarily revealing stuff, whether you know what to do with that or not, and the more uncomfortable it feels to you, the more that's the sensation of stretching. That's showing you that there's areas of your body that have locked up, and this is kind of areas of your psyche and your emotions that have locked up, and this is you stretching that out. So that discomfort needs to be something that you start to reinterpret as a good thing, as nourishing, as healing, as hope, as future. And so to the general audience who might hear in this, that nature of that question, I want you to consider, hey, this might be something you could learn from. Maybe you ought to sit with a therapist someday and just open up about things that honestly you never have. Those who have like a regular relationship with their therapist, I've had several clients tell me this in the last month. They've just said, Jim, we're not necessarily here to work on something specific today. Maybe we were originally. But I'm here and I'm working with you now and I'm realized I've just naturally started telling you things that I don't tell anybody else. And through the process of engaging with you, sometimes I realize things that I actually feel about things that I wouldn't have stumbled upon unless I had an honest, good faith partner to really discuss things with completely freely. Like all like options on the table. And that is a really powerful experience. I've always, I don't know how you felt about this, Nick, but as a therapist, I've always resented when people say, well, sometimes a therapist is just a good sounding board. There's something about that phrase that bugs me because I feel like, your mom's your sounding board. I'm your shrink. Like, I'm here to dive deeper than that. But it starts there.
I don't know.
It starts there. I guess I don't know. It always feels so surface level that I'm like, fine, if that's what gets you in, like, let's start there.
I get it. I mean, because I do not think you're a good sounding board. So I see why that would be upsetting.
Man, he's trying, isn't he?
He speaks
trying.
for both of us.
I'm ripping up this letter. This guy.
Yeah, thank you for the letter. I hope that helps, gives you a little bit of direction where to go.
Lean in, but at least talk about the discomfort, even if you can't talk about the thing that causes the discomfort.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. It's encouraged. So thank you for writing in. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break before we get to the ending part of our show. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's Producer sponsor is Judy Schneider. Judy would like to give a shout-out to her dear friend, Dr. Hariyardi Sharshima Abdul-Majid, and her amazing team members at Mercy Malaysia. Mercy Malaysia offers early counseling and psychosocial support for persons affected by disasters and gives the victims a safe space to express their feelings and thoughts. Sharima is currently caring for her father, who is suffering from Alzheimer's, while still organizing and planning for Mercy Malaysia when time allows. Judy is proud of her and her astounding work ethic and just wants to say that she loves her, misses her warm hugs, and thinks about her father every day. If you'd like to join Judy and make the show possible, you can go to www.patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. It's time for the end of the show.
We're here to do some announcements, and the first big one is that we are launching the first ever Pod Therapy Fantasy Football League, which may or may not include Jacob, depending upon how many people actually sign up. It is going to be an 8-person PPR league. That's points per reception. It'll be hosted on ESPN. You must be a Patreon of the show at least the THERAPOD level or higher. In order to be a part of the league, there will be no entrance fee. The winner will receive immortality and everlasting glory, along with a tall cup of combined tears of the 7 failures of humanity who fell beneath your inglorious might.
And that's promised by
win.
Jim.
Copyright, trademarked, and authorized.
Yeah, who's always good on fulfilling his promises.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Yes, so if you would like to enroll in our Pod Therapy Fantasy Football League, look on the Patreon page. There's going to be an announcement, and we are going to post that announcement on Wednesday, August 28th, 2019. So it's also right after this show is going to post. You're going to see a second announcement that says the Fantasy Football League. Wednesday, the 28th, it's going to post. And here's the deal. We are absolutely giving deference to those who have a higher sponsorship level. So if you're like, hey, I'm a Therapod, I want to do it, what we need you to post, and you'll just read the instructions on the thing. We'll talk about needing your email. But if, like, let's say 10 people want to do it, and I'd probably just expand the league and just make it a 10-person league at that point. But anyway, take your shot. Join us over at the Patreon. If you have not signed up to support the show yet, join at the Therapod level. If you're a TherapAL and you've just been hanging around for a good reason to upgrade up to a Therapod, this is your chance. Go to patreon.com/therapy, get at the Therapod or higher level, and you can join us in the Fantasy Football League. Nick and I will not be co-owning a team. We will be competing against each other, as has always been our case. This will be our 3rd year competing against each other. It is a ruthless blood sport, and Jacob may be involved too. If you're wondering what the rules of the Fantasy Football League are, you must have a psychology or therapy-related team name. So you've got to be creative in that way. You've got to come up with something. That's going to be a good one.
Okay.
I've already got dibs on my classic name, so that's mine. Yeah. You must actually play the whole season. So no leaving openings on your starter roster, or you will not be reinvited back, and we will definitely shame you a lot. So third point, though, on the rules, you can totally share ownership of your team with another person. So let's say you sponsor the show. you're not into football, but your spouse or your child is, make them own your team with you, and then you can totally make them run the team. I don't care. But in order to have a spot on the squad, you've got to be a THERAPOD or better Patreon of the show. So you're allowed to share ownership with the team. They don't have to be a Patreon. You can do that with as many people as you like. And other rules, you must participate in the live online draft, so no auto drafting. And the live online draft is going to be online in the ESPN app. All you need is the ESPN Fantasy Football app to do it. And it's going to be on Sunday, September 1st, 2019 at 9 a.m. So that'll be about 3 hours before Nick and I record our regular show. And so on that show, we will be talking about all of our draft picks and what went down during the draft. And we'll probably talk about you by name and whose squad we actually have respect for.
9 a.m.
9 a.m. Pacific, yo. That keeps up with the rest of the world. I think we just lost Jacob.
Oh, he's out.
He's like, I'm going to be like knee deep in an IV being recovered at that time.
Jacob, you'll still be up at 9 a.m.
Yeah, it's true. Just give it 2 more hours and just join us. So you can join us Sunday at 9 a.m. on the 1st of September, which will be 4 days before the actual season starts, and that'll be a lot of fun. I think it's a week before the actual season starts. I think it's that Thursday, so a lot of fun. So again, look for the post on patreon.com, and you can tell us in the post that you want to be a part of it, and you can sign up. So the Pod Therapy Fantasy Football League. Also, Nick, I have a few apologies to do. Dear Pizza, I apologize for inviting our fans to compare you to their lovers and tell us how they best like you. Oh, this is good. Yeah, this is really good. I didn't expect Ice Blue Scoop to say room temperature and leftover from the night before.
Winner.
That was the winner by far. That was so dark. Sorry, Pizza. This is good. I like this music. Dear Postmates, I'm sorry that I called you out on Twitter for ruining my dinner Friday night when your system failed to send a driver to Brando's Chicago bar on Blue Diamond to pick up my Italian beef sandwich and Vienna hot dog. I'm so sorry again for reiterating your failure here on this very popular, internationally supported show, officially endorsed by Dr. Drew, I'll have you know. And if you'd like to send me a coupon code, I'm on Twitter at SinCityShrink, and I apologize for asking you to send me that too. Last apology, Nick. I have an apology for
Overdue.
Mr. Jacob Smith. Nick is handing him
What have we got here?
my envelope and letter to Mr. Jacob Smith. He's pulling out a knife to open it. That is the most Louisiana damn thing. He flicks out a switchblade. There's so many knives on his desk. It's like a surgeon over there.
There is it's a card with a picture of a puppy sniffing a butterfly.
Yes.
Things are
Very
falling
pretty.
out of it.
Very pretty.
Let's see. Jacob, I hope the holy shit, your writing is worse than mine.
Yeah, that's healthcare.
I hope the sushi you purchase with this money is terrible, and that the chef has the common cold.
Yes.
Fuck you in the face, Jim.
Yes.
And there's some cash money in there as
There
well.
it is. Debt paid. No more am I indebted to either of you bastards. I needed to get that done before the next March
Disagree.
game.
Hey, Jacob, for the record, what month is it?
I think it's August.
It's still August.
Okay.
All right, so that's what, 5 months deep?
I went to the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. I'm not good at math, but I know that it's past March.
I think it is. Slightly. When did I get you? I think I got you in May or June.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was in June.
Yeah.
Listen, a Lannister always pays
Really
his debts.
selling this fantasy football league, aren't we?
Yes, yeah. You should definitely count on my
This is what
consistency.
you have to look forward
Hey,
to.
we're pretty damn consistent when it comes to fantasy football.
Yeah.
And
This
also,
check is from the THERAPOD Patreon.
no,
What
don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
Shit! I know that's not the case.
You wish we had a bank account. Yeah, we ain't got no bank account. We have a piggy bank.
If
we
Pod
shove dollars
Therapy,
into.
if Pod Therapy paid for that, he'd have to come to my house to get it out from under the mattress.
Yeah.
So I know that's not true.
Yeah, exactly. Just mothballs. All right, so that concludes my apologies, Nick.
Thank you. All right, let's go Patreons.
Yeah, we do want to thank our Patreons. Nope. Who support the show at patreon.com/therapy. We have a new THERAPAL, technically. Frozen Cusser, who's actually been a THERAPAL for a while, doubled down and bumped that pledge up to $2, earning a second shout-out at THERAPAL level. But I'm wondering if Frozen Custer's now going to abuse that and just upgrade 3 more times. Just 1 week at a time.
I would.
Keeps getting, and then just does it, and then he gets the THERAPOD announcement.
Yeah.
That would be genius. That's a lot for $1. Not bad.
And we especially want to thank our bosses, the Elite Eight and Mysterious and Shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the TheraProducers. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, Chairman of the Board, Kayla Lansbury, David Data Scoop Vialon, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Dawn, and ex officio board member Ellie O'Dare.
If you would like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy our spontaneous side projects like our book club and the Pod Therapy Fantasy Football League, you can go to www.patreon.com/therapy, and thank you for supporting mental health. That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. We want to thank Yakov Smirnoff, who contributed to our show today, and our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Share this episode with someone who needs it by opening this episode's description in your podcast app and copying and pasting the link provided into your social media. Don't forget, you can find us on Facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys, and now at Patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangeman.
In Soviet Russia, I am still Jim, I think.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
What a country! We also need to ask people to start rating us on iTunes and other places. Yeah. iTunes, Spreaker, wherever you get podcasts, rate us.
Yeah, fuck
but
that.
Only if you've got 5 stars. Jesus, don't give us any less than that. We can't take it. We have very, very minuscule reviews.
No, don't waste your time. We're not worth it.
We're not worth it. All right, Patreons, you've heard enough junk. Definitely check out